My expectation or my prediction for the quarterfinal match, the UEFA Champions League quarterfinal match between Real Madrid and Bayern Munich was that Real Madrid is going to win the match, or rather, they are going to win the tie. But what I said was that over the two legs, Real Madrid is going to turn out to be victorious. But at the same time, I also implied that they're going to win the first leg too, especially this since they're playing at home. But it turns out that Bayern Munich, they won the match. They won it 2-1. So yeah, the first part of it was wrong, but I still have the second leg. So I'm still expecting that Real Madrid can overturn the result and prove me right. But right now I'd like to explain the logic behind why I decided to predict that Real Madrid would win. The first thing is Real Madrid's performance in Champions League matches. So regardless of how bad they perform in the domestic league, in the La Liga, they somehow find a way to put on good matches, good performances during the Champions League matches, and especially if it's a high-stake match like the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, or even the knockout or round of 16. In short, any match that they have to win or they are going to get eliminated. Whenever they're in such a situation in Champions League, they show up more often than not, regardless of whoever the opponent is, for the most part, which is what happened against Manchester City in the round of 16. So overall, if you compare this season, okay, I admit that Manchester City did not have the best of seasons, but relatively, if you compare Real Madrid and Manchester City, I would say that Manchester City had a better season as compared to Real Madrid. And I would think that most of the people who follow football will agree with me that relatively speaking, Manchester City has had a better season than Real Madrid, who got one of his managers sacked and they're out of the title race most likely. And so they definitely are having a comparatively bad season compared to Manchester City. But still, when they played against Manchester City, they blew them out. Real Madrid blew out Manchester City. They had no chance. So now when they are facing Bayern Munich, one can expect similar things. But there are some ways in which Bayern Munich is not Manchester City, because I think Bayern Munich is probably one of the best teams in Europe this season. I think the top three teams in Europe this season are Bayern Munich, Barcelona, and Arsenal. In fact, Arsenal were doing quite good up until the end of March, because towards the end of March, just before the international break, they lost the Carabao Cup final. Then after the international break, the first match they lost to Southampton, a second division team, in the FA Cup in the FA Cup tie. So they got knocked out of two tournaments in two matches. So from a potential quadruple, they now only have a chance to win two trophies. And to be honest, I think they only have a realistic chance of winning one trophy, which is the Premier League. Yeah, but for the most part, even though their Arsenal's playing style was not the most attractive, but they have been performing very well. So I think that prior to their loss in the Carabao Cup final, I think they have just lost 3 or maybe 4 matches up to that point. I think it was 3 matches. I'm not sure, but I think it's 3 matches. I think the first one was against Liverpool, maybe late August or early September. The second one was against Aston Villa on December 2025, and the third one was against Manchester United in January 2026. Apart from these 3 matches, they didn't lose a single one. But then they lost 2 consecutive matches and got knocked out of 2 tournaments. So that's why I would think that Arsenal is probably the third best team in Europe right now, apart from Manchester City and Barcelona. Bayern Munich and Barcelona. And I think, as per my opinion, I would put Bayern Munich to be the best team in Europe. Barcelona comes in second and Arsenal at third. So anyway, I diverged from the topic. The point was that Bayern Munich is not Manchester City. They are probably the best team in Europe this season. So for when Real Madrid plays most teams, they can do this kind of miracles when it's a do or die situations. So as lethargic or as lifeless they might be, and they might be in the league matches, they might lose to some unknown team in the league match, to Mallorca or to Getafe or some very mid-table team, or maybe at the bottom of the table team again in the La Liga. But they find a way in the Champions League matches against most teams, unless that team happens to be one of the best teams in Europe that doesn't have any major flaws, unlike Manchester City. Because Manchester City is a team in transition. They are now building a new era, a new phase, so they are not well oiled. But on the other hand, Bayern Munich is pretty much very well oiled, well organized, with good chemistry. So it was supposed to be difficult. So it seems like I'm arguing against myself, because if Bayern Munich is so good, so why am I saying that Real Madrid is going to win against Bayern Munich? And that's because over the recent few matches, Bayern have not been performing as well as they were throughout this season. In fact, I think up till December or early January, they were unbeaten in the league. But eventually they lost. And also the past few matches, the wins were not very convincing. In fact, the match just before the match against the league match, the Bundesliga match, just before their match against Real Madrid, they were losing. They were trailing 2-0. I forgot which team it was, but they were trailing 2-0. Then in the last 10 minutes, they scored 3 goals and won the match. So that's very impressive. But the point to be noted is that they conceded 2 goals and they were trailing 2-0 by the 80th minute against the Bundesliga team. So one can imagine what Real Madrid can do to such teams. If a mid-table or if a mid-table Bundesliga team can do this to Bayern Munich, then imagine what Real Madrid could do. Especially, as I've said, Real Madrid seems to show up whenever it's a do or die situation. So as good as Bayern Munich is, they are not invincible, as we have just seen from their performance in the Bundesliga, where they were trailing. And not just that match, quite a few others. Just let me just take a look at Bayern Munich's recent results, and maybe then I can talk more about it. Okay, so we have SC Freiburg, the match that I was talking about. This was the match before the match against Real Madrid. So my argument was that if SC Freiburg, a club that's in the 8th position in the Bundesliga, if they can do this to Real Madrid, to Bayern Munich, to lead for 80 minutes against Bayern Munich, okay, I admit that they eventually lost when Bayern because Bayern Munich came back and by scoring 3 goals in the final 10 minutes of the match. But still, an 8th position team from the Bundesliga was able to lead Bayern Munich for 80 minutes. So if SC Freiburg could do this, then imagine what Real Madrid could do to Bayern Munich. Especially as I just mentioned, Real Madrid's ability to switch on, like step up when it's a do or die situation. So that is my rationale. So let's see what happens in the second leg, whether Real Madrid can overrun the result and pull off a win. Let's see what happens.